Today I am surrounded by some of the most shelfless books from this area. As we all know, a little shelflessness is really good for books. Being taken off of the shelf, given the attention of their owners, is great for the books. However, shelflessness can go to an extreme when the book does not have a place on a shelf. Some books are placed on a shelf, but in a way that makes it difficult for them to gain access to their owners, or in a way that interferes with the surrounding book's sense of shelf, such as being placed sideways and on top of vertically oriented books. Others among these books have been so shelfless that they haven't even been near a shelf in a long time. They have no sense of what a shelf is anymore. The longer that this problem of shelflessness persists, the more likely it is that these books could end up in a thrift store, which drastically increases their chances of being recycled, or more likely and far worse, placed in a landfill. Luckily, something is being done to help these books find a new sense of shelf. This is the room we're going to be working in. As you can see, there is a ledge here by the window. That is just some unused space. It is not very deep. It's about 7¼ inches deep, which is decently deep, but for a good bookshelf, you want at least 9 inches. So I'm gonna be building shelves and they're gonna be coming forward, and eventually I'm gonna add some trim. I have already started working on this project. I didn't film any of the work that I did. I should have, but I didn't. So I'm gonna go ahead and catch you up on what I have done. I have purchased lumber and I have drawn out the space and come up with measurements for where I need things to be based on my other plans and the space itself. I am no carpenter. I'm not great at this, but I am going to take a stab at it and we'll see how it turns out. Hopefully it turns out well. It's time for me to clear the space and get ready to get to work.
It was really important for me to get this room all packed away because, as you will see throughout this video, this room is actually my primary workspace. One of the advantages to not having proper flooring in this area is that I could just roll up the rugs. However, I did have to brave the elements in order to retrieve pretty much all of my tools, with the exception of my drill and tape measure. I would love to one day have a workshop, but without one, we make do. Back inside, I was kind of stalling because I was feeling insecure about my woodworking. So I started by locating the studs for when I would need to anchor the shelves in place. But at last, I had to begin cutting my wood. Though I thought I had measured carefully, I accidentally made my first cut a bit too long, which ended up being one of those happy little accidents because I remeasured and realized that the end of my pine boards were not quite square. So I had an opportunity to square out not only that end, but the ends on all of my boards. So my shelves didn't end up all wonky. So after that fortuitous discovery, I just went ahead and made sure the ends of all of my boards were square so I wouldn't forget before making each cut. Throughout the cutting process, I was constantly measuring, remeasuring, and checking against my notes as to how each of my measurement would need to be. And then I would use a speed square to mark out the line for the cut that I would need. Then, before making each cut, I would lower the blade without turning it on in order to ensure that it would fall in the correct place. With all of the cuts made, it was time to move on to drilling pocket holes with my Kreg jig. Off camera, I set everything up using scrap pieces of wood to make sure that I had the settings correct. However, there is a little mechanism on the drill bit itself to keep it set to the correct depth, and that had not been tightened properly, which ended up causing some problems. Problems of which I was blissfully unaware while I did all of the sanding. And with all of the sanding done, I was ready to assemble the shelves at last. A set of corner clamps, or at least another set of hands, would have been really nice during this process. But here is where I run into trouble. Not due to a lack of clamps, although I think that had something to do with it. But if you watch the bottom left corner, you will see that the bottom piece popped apart. As I recall, I had to drill an extra set of holes. I made sure that wherever the shelves were going to attach to that center divider, that the pocket holes were offset from one another so that the screws wouldn't get stuck. And the 2x4 at the top back added some extra stability. And even though I had dry fit the vertical boards, I still wanted to dry fit it again at this point. I then added 2x1s to the bottom of each shelf for a little bit of added stability and style. And I used a brad nailer and glue to hold those in place. I considered using screws, which would have made it more structural. I was already concerned about time, however, and feeling pretty good about how sturdy each shelf already felt.
It's a new day, everyone, and I can't believe I made this. I told you, I'm not a woodworker. I don't build things with wood. I definitely don't do stuff that needs to be like a little bit more exact and perfect. It's not perfect. I can't believe how good it looks. I'm speechless. I cut these pieces down to size. They're going to go along the back end of the shelves, but I cut them just a little tiny teensy weensy bit too long. So I want to just shave off the tiniest little bit off the ends of these, and then I can install them in the back. Once those are installed, I will be able to go through with my wood filler and fill in all of these little brad holes that I got all over the place. And I also I also had some of the brad nails come through the front of the wood on this piece because I just nailed them in too close to the edge. So I need to wood filler those. And then we'll get on to making the shelves for the other side of the window. And I feel so much more confident. I really didn't know if I was going to be able to put this together, but like, it's sturdy. Look, it's not wibble wobbling back and forth. Like, it's solid. I built that, guys. I built it. Okay, well, I need to get doing those things then.
As you can see here, my miter saw has a short cord and required an extension cord in order for it to be usable. That same extension cord also had to be used to power my air compressor for when I used the brad nailer, and I also had to use that cord to power my sander. I used my Dremel to cut off the ends of the brad nails that were poking out, and then used wood filler in order to fill in those gouged out spots. When the wood filler was dry, it was time for some more sanding. Really, it feels like the sanding never ends. I just want to get to staining already. On the subject of sanding, I had penciled in a little label for each of the boards, and I thought it would just erase out, but it didn't. I had to sand it out. But when all the sanding was over, it was time to stain at last. I had a room set up to be ventilated, and of course I also wore some extra protection for my lungs. But it took an embarrassing long time to take the lid off of this bottle of stain. I was about ready to give up, but I finally got it off. I couldn't find my latex gloves, and I didn't feel like going out to the shed to look for them, so I just put a plastic bag over my hand and then an old sock over that, and I used that to stain the shelves. And when that was all done, it was left to dry and cure overnight. So while that was drying out, it was time to get to work on the second set of shelves. These shelves had slightly different measurements from the first set of shelves, but otherwise they came together in much the same way. This footage is somewhat out of order as I actually cut these while I waited for wood filler to dry. And with all of the cuts done, I took a moment to tidy up just a little bit for my own personal sanity's sake. This time around, I ended up drilling my pocket holes a little bit farther from the edge of the wood, which ended up saving me later. And of course, there was more of the endless sanding. Here, I was measuring to figure out where to put the central divider for the second set of shelves.
No. No! What did I do wrong?
What I did wrong was cut the bottom board about 1/4 of an inch too long. But because my pocket holes were farther from the edge, I was able to nip just a little bit off of each side of the board, and it worked out just fine. And after my husband put the kids to bed, I finally got that extra set of hands to help me finish up.
It is first thing in the morning, but I wanted to get this stuff put in place, nailed in place, and I wanted to fill all the holes before taking my son to school so that the holes can dry and then I can sand it and stain it. That's the plan. Here we go.
I didn't get good footage of the first time around with the wood filler, so I got it now, and you can see how it looks as it's applied and after it has dried. And so of course, I had to do more sanding. At least this would be the last of the sanding for this project. Hallelujah! In the background, you can see that I had pulled the first shelves out, so this set of shelves was ready to go in and get their own set of stain, and that would also be left overnight in this room. Now I could finally install these shelves. First, I marked out where the stud was on the side in the shelves, since I wouldn't be able to see my marking on the wall once they were in place. And once the shelves were up, I used some shims to get them level. It turns out my little ledge was on a little bit of a slope. This is the final day of the project. I just have to install this second set of shelves. The process for these shelves were very similar to the first set of shelves, and so I was able to get it done fairly quickly. I started by drilling a small countersink hole with a large drill bit, and then went in with a smaller drill bit to drill out the hole, and then finally used a screw to screw it into the stud. Off camera, I also added some little bits of wood to the top sides of the shelves to hold my curtain rods.
As you can see, thanks to the shelving project, our books have now found an increased sense of shelf. There's also ample room for further beautification of their new shelf life. And not only have these books found a new, improved sense of shelf, but the room as a whole has benefited from these shelves. It now feels more warm, inviting, and a lot more like home. We here at the Daily Fish are immensely proud of what has been achieved here. Thank you for watching. Please, if you enjoyed anything about that video, hit the like button. And if you would like to see more of what I do, please subscribe. And then I'll see you in the next one. Melissa Robinson, signing off.